Delegations attended by Scottish and Welsh Government ministers and civil servants from Northern Ireland. This, the 8th such JMC meeting I've chaired this year, followed the significant progress made in recent months with the devolved governments in developing UK-wide frameworks to protect the vital internal market of the United Kingdom.
Thompson.
Mr. Speaker, from policing to education, from health to environment, the approach of the SNP government is that control from Edinburgh is best and, when in doubt, centralise. So can my right honourable friend update the House as to what he is doing to ensure that the Smith Commission promise to ensure decentralisation from Edinburgh is met?
Mr. Speaker, the Smith Commission was clear that it is the responsibility of the Scottish Government to work with the Scottish Parliament, Civic Scotland and local authorities to ensure power does devolve from Holyrood to local communities, and for our part we are ready to help the Scottish Government to implement the Smith Commission in full and will give them our support if and when they choose to do that.
John Trickett.
Mr. Speaker, will the Minister confirm without equivocation that he will fully comply with yesterday's resolution before the Commons, that all the information provided to the Cabinet will be made available to the House as soon as the Cabinet finishes, if it ever does?
Mr. Speaker, I set out the government's position yesterday in the debate. Clearly, we will reflect upon the outcome of the vote yesterday, but at the moment there is no agreed deal. There is a provisional agreement between negotiators which has yet to be considered by the UK Cabinet or by the Member States meeting in Council at 27.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the centenary of the Parliament Act, how do we encourage greater diversity in candidates for public office, such as Armandeep Garcha, a Sikh woman in my constituency?
Minister Brandon Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend makes a good point. It's fantastic to see such a wide diversity of candidates in Walsall, and I would just remind the House the Government Equalities Office is providing financial assistance for all MPs to encourage female constituents to come here on the 21st of November, and I hope more colleagues will take that opportunity up.
Grogan.
In addition to the register of lobbyists, in the interests of transparency, shouldn't all think tanks be obliged to publish their funding sources?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we believe that the governing legislation in this case is working well, but would be happy to look into any specific further points he'd like to make.
Miller.
The Government Equality Office funding is in education, its staff are in the Home Office and its ministers are in DFID. My Select Committee recommended a year ago the wholesale move of the GEO to the Cabinet Office. Does my right honourable friend agree with that?
Well, my right honourable friend and her committee did indeed make a powerful case. This has needed a lot of cross-departmental discussion, but I hope that we will, in the very near future, be in a position to give her a definitive response.
Well, I'm extremely grateful to the Minister. Everybody is present and correct. And it is no bad thing that we start Prime Minister's questions precisely on time. Questions to the Prime Minister, Mr. Alex Burkhart.
Mr. Speaker. Number one.
The Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. The Cabinet, Mr. Speaker, will meet this afternoon to consider the draft agreement the negotiating teams have reached in Brussels, and the Cabinet will decide on the next steps in the national interest. I'm confident that this takes us significantly closer to delivering on what the British people voted for in the referendum. We will take back control of our borders, our laws and our money, leave the common fisheries policy and the common agricultural policy while protecting jobs, security and the integrity of our United Kingdom. And, Mr. Speaker, I will come back to the House to update it on the outcome.
Alex Burkhart.
Yesterday saw the best wage growth figures in a decade. And the best employment figures in my lifetime. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that this can only be delivered by the free market economics that unite this side of the House, and not by the bankrupt socialism opposites.
My honourable friend is absolutely right. As he references yesterday's figures, they showed more people in work than ever before. They showed the female unemployment rate at a record low, and as he says, the fastest regular wage growth in nearly a decade. But can I say to my honourable friend, that is also on top of figures last week that showed our economy growing 3 times faster than the Eurozone average. The share of jobs on low hourly pay at a record low, and the number of children in workless households at a record low. But you only get that by good Conservative management of the economy.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 2 years of bungled negotiations, from what we know of the government's deal, it's a failure in its own terms. It doesn't deliver a Brexit for the whole country. It breaches...
If necessary, I'll say it again and again to members on both sides of the House. Voices must be heard. I happen to know that there are visitors from overseas in the gallery. Let's try to impress them. Order, not merely with our liveliness, but with our courtesy. Mr. Jeremy Corbyn.
It breaches the Prime Minister's own red lines. It doesn't deliver a strong economic deal that supports jobs and industry. And we know they haven't prepared seriously for no deal. So does the Prime Minister still intend to put a false choice to Parliament between her botched deal or no deal?
Prime Minister!
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman that he's wrong in the description that he set out, but can I also say to him, time and time again, he has stood up in this House and complained and said that the government isn't making progress, the government isn't anywhere close to a deal. Now, when we're making progress and close to a deal, he's complaining about that. Can I just say, I think what that clearly shows is that he and the Labour Party have only one intention, that is to frustrate Brexit and betray the vote of the British people.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Well, Mr. Speaker, after the utter shambles of the last 2 years of negotiations, the Prime Minister should look to herself in this. And she hasn't managed to convince quite a lot of people behind her. The Rail Minister resigned last week, saying to present the nation with a choice between 2 deeply unattractive outcomes, vassalage and chaos, is a failure of British statecraft on a scale unseen since the Suez Crisis, and that from a Tory MP. Last night, the EU's lead Brexit negotiator reportedly told the 27 European ambassadors the UK must align their rules, but the EU will retain all the controls. Is that a fair summary of the Prime Minister's deal?
Prime Minister!
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman, as I have said all along throughout these negotiations, what we are doing is negotiating a good deal for the United Kingdom. We're negotiating a deal that delivers on the vote of the British people, that takes back control of our money law and borders, that ensures we leave the common fisheries policy, we leave the customs union, we leave the common agricultural policy, but we protect jobs, we protect security, and we protect the integrity of the United Kingdom.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Mr. Speaker, under the Prime Minister's deal, we're going to spend years with less say over our laws or how our money is spent. And the International Trade Secretary said last week the decision to withdraw from any backstop agreement could not be contracted to somebody else. Can the Prime Minister confirm whether under her deal it will be the sovereign right of the UK Parliament to unilaterally withdraw from any backstop?
Prime Minister!
I say to the right honourable gentleman, there needs to be a backstop as an insurance policy. there needs to be a backstop as an insurance policy, but neither side actually wants us to be in that backstop because we want to bring the future relationship into place at the end of December 2020. And I'm aware of the concerns that there are, that we don't want to be in a position where the European Union would find it comfortable to keep the United Kingdom in the backstop permanently. And that's why any backstop has to be temporary.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, I think that non-answer has confirmed that Parliament won't have that sovereign right. Mr. Speaker, the International Trade Secretary breezily declared he'd have 40 trade deals ready to be signed the second after midnight when we leave the EU.
How's it going?
Well, with 4 months to go, can the Prime Minister tell us exactly how many of these 40 deals have been negotiated?
Prime Minister.
We are doing two things. First of all, we are negotiating to ensure that we maintain the trade deals that currently exist with the European Union when we leave the...
Order. I'm sorry. It's not acceptable for members to shout at the Prime Minister when she's answering questions. We've been talking recently in this chamber about respect and good behaviour. On both sides, the person who has the floor must be heard. And that's the end of the matter. The Prime Minister.
We have been negotiating on two fronts. We're negotiating on the continuity agreements, which ensure that those trade deals that we've been party to as a member of the European Union are able to continue when we leave the European Union. And we have also started discussions with other countries about the trade deals that we can forge across the world once we leave the European Union. But I say to the right honourable gentleman, if he's interested in trade deals, he really needs to sort out the Labour Party's position on this issue. Because originally they said that they wanted to do trade deals around the rest of the world. Now he says he wants to be in the customs union. That would stop him from doing trade deals around the rest of the world. We know what's good for this country, an independent trade policy and trade deals, good trade deals with Europe and with the rest of the world.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, the International Trade Secretary is not the only one who doesn't understand international trade rules. And he's not the only one in the Cabinet. And he's not the only one in the Cabinet that doesn't understand a few things. The Brexit Secretary said last week, and I quote, "I hadn't previously understood the extent of this, but we are particularly reliant on the Dover to Calais crossing." When did the Prime Minister become aware of this absolutely shocking revelation about Britain's trade routes?
The Prime Minister.
I really have to say to the right honourable gentleman, he stands here and reads out something that says that we don't know about trade policy. We do know about trade policy. That's exactly why we're negotiating the continuity agreements. It's why we'll be taking our place as an independent state in the World Trade Organization. But he wants to talk about different positions that are being taken. What we're doing is delivering a good deal that would deliver on the vote of the British people. We're delivering Brexit. What have we seen recently from the Labour Party? Well, the Labour leader said we can't stop Brexit. The shadow Brexit Secretary said we can stop it. So when he stands up, he should make it clear. Is it Labour Party policy to stop Brexit?
Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, Labour respects the result of the referendum. But what we don't respect is the shambolic mess that this government has made of negotiations. The mess they've created that they can't now get themselves out of. Yeah. We won't let them destroy this country's economy or the jobs and life chances of so many others.
That's exactly the point.
And Mr. Speaker, if the Brexit Secretary is still in office by the time the Cabinet meets this afternoon, could she take him on one side and have a quiet word with him and tell him that 10,000 lorries arrive at Dover every day, handling 17% of this country's entire trade in goods, estimated to be £122 billion last year. This woeful ignorance by a person in high office is disturbing to so many people. This government, Mr. Speaker, has spent 2 years negotiating a bad deal that will leave the country in an indefinite halfway house without a real say. Yet they think they can impose a false choice on Parliament between a half-baked deal or no deal, when a sensible alternative plan could bring together.
No matter how long it takes, the right honourable gentleman will not be shouted down in the House of Commons. It's as simple and unarguable as that. Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, when a sensible alternative plan could bring together Parliament and the country. Even Conservative MPs say the Prime Minister is offering a choice between the worst of all worlds and a catastrophic series of consequences. When will the Prime Minister recognise that neither of these options is acceptable?
The right honourable gentleman talks about woeful ignorance. I'll tell him where the woeful ignorance lies. It lies on a Labour Party front bench that thinks you can build a better economy by spending £1,000 billion more, putting up people's taxes and destroying jobs. The real threat to jobs and growth in this country sits on the Labour Party front bench. And I'll tell him what we're delivering in relation to Brexit. He says, what about Brexit? Yes, I'll tell him what we're delivering on Brexit. We will not rerun the referendum. We will not renege on the decision of the British people. We will leave the customs union, we will leave the common fisheries policy, we will leave the common agricultural policy, and we will take back control of our money, laws and borders. We will deliver Brexit, and the United Kingdom is leaving the European Union on the 29th of March 2019.
Mr. Peter Bone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is the Prime Minister aware that if the media reports about the EU agreement are in any way accurate, you are not delivering the Brexit people voted for, and today you will lose the support of many Conservative MPs and millions of voters across the country?
Prime Minister!
Can I say to my honourable friend,
members must calm themselves. I've often advised taking some sort of soothing medicament, and people may feel better in consequence. I want to hear what the Prime Minister has to say, and I hope the House has the courtesy to want to do so as well. The Prime Minister.
Can I say to my honourable friend that what we have been negotiating is a deal that does deliver on the vote of the British people. In the list that I set out earlier, I left out one of the things that the British people are very keen to see from this deal, which is an end to free movement, and we will ensure that we are delivering on that, as well as those other elements that I have set out. What we're doing is a deal that delivers on that vote, but in doing so protects jobs, protects the integrity of our United Kingdom, and protects the security of people in this country.
Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Scottish National Party, with other opposition leaders, have written to the Prime Minister, urging her to drop plans to prevent a truly meaningful vote on the Brexit deal. Shamefully, it seems that the government is seeking to prevent opposition amendments to the deal, effectively gagging the sovereignty of Parliament by playing dirty tricks on procedures. Can I ask the Prime Minister, what is she afraid of? Is her government so weak that the Brexit deal will not succeed when other solutions are still on the table?
Prime Minister.
To the right honourable gentleman, we have been very clear that there will be a meaningful vote in this House. We have also been clear that the motion on the deal will be amendable. But I also say to the right honourable gentleman that I think if you went out and asked any member of the public, when the government brings a deal back from Europe, what do you expect Parliament to vote on? I think they would expect Parliament to vote on the deal.
Ian Blackford.
Expect Parliament to take its responsibilities, which is holding the government to account and to amend the deal. This Prime Minister is hamstrung, divided, desperate and looking defeated. In a total panic, the Prime Minister has been reduced to playing political games rather than playing fair. Mr. Speaker, this is not a game. The SNP will never ever gamble with Scotland's future. There is only one lifeline left. To protect jobs in Scotland, we must stay in the single market and the customs union. The Prime Minister will not drag Scotland out against its will. If there is a deal to protect the economy in Northern Ireland, why not Scotland?
Minister! The honourable gentleman stands up and says that the SNP will not gamble with Scotland's future. I say to him, the SNP gambles with Scotland's future every time it stands up and talks about independence.
No Doherty!
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Figures released yesterday show that for the first time ever, more than half of disabled people are now in work, including many military veterans. So will the Prime Minister join me in thanking those employers who have signed up to the Disability Confidence Scheme, which has allowed such great strides to be made in this area?
Minister! Yes, well, can I say to my honourable friend that, first of all, it is very good news to see more disabled people getting into the workplace, and I'm grateful to him for raising the Disability Confidence Scheme. And I'd like to praise the work of my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, who created and personally championed this scheme since it started back in 2013. As my honourable friend obviously knows, it works directly with employers. It aims to challenge perceptions of what it means to employ a disabled person, and we will continue to ensure that we're giving every possible effort to make sure that more disabled people who want to be in the workplace are able to take their place in the workplace.
Chris Elmore.
The Prime Minister's likely Brexit agreement will leave our country economically weaker, mean that we take EU rules without any say, and give years of uncertainty for business. Not my words, the words of her latest ministerial resignation, or at least the latest as far as we know. Does she agree with him, and isn't it about time she admitted that there is little to no support for her reckless plan in her cabinet, and even less in Parliament?
Prime Minister! The honourable gentleman, as I have said earlier, what we're negotiating is a deal that will deliver on the vote, that will actually ensure that, and the proposals that we put forward in the summer, to ensure that we're able to see that frictionless trade across borders, that free trade area with the European Union, and gives Parliament a lock on those rules.
Antoinette Sandbach.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In 2017, ministers committed to provide visualisations of the rolling stock depot and viaducts proposed in my constituency by HS2. After a whole year of delaying, HS2 are now refusing to deliver on this commitment and ignoring ministers. Will the Prime Minister ensure that within the next week my constituents get the visualisations of the viaducts and rolling stock depot they were promised, so they're able to comment on the draft environmental statement?
Prime Minister! My honourable friend, I recognise the concern that her constituents have raised about this issue, and indeed would like to thank her for the hard work that she has undertaken in order to campaign on this issue on her constituents' behalf. I understand that my right honourable friend, the Transport Secretary, is aware of this issue. He is urgently looking into it, and I would encourage my honourable friend to continue to engage with the Transport Secretary on this matter, so that to ensure that her constituents get what they were promised.
Marion Fellow.
Mr. Speaker, post offices are closing in their hundreds as postmasters struggle to make a living on the contract introduced by this government. Through its North Star initiative, the publicly owned post office is aiming for £100 million of profit by 2021, while postmasters' pay has declined by £107 million since 2012. Will the Prime Minister take action now to save our post office network and intervene to ensure postmasters get a fair rate?
Prime Minister.
Can I say to the honourable lady that obviously we have seen a change to our post office network across the United Kingdom, and that has happened as people's pattern of behaviour in relation to these matters has changed. And I'm sure the post office is making decisions that they believe are right for local communities to ensure that the services are there where they are needed.
Reductions in business rates will help thousands of small and medium-sized shops, restaurants and pubs in our town centres. Will the Prime Minister commit to continue to work for fundamental reform of local business taxation so that our local shops and businesses of all sorts can compete fairly with the online giants?
Prime Minister.
Can I say to my honourable friend that to thank him for raising the fact and referring in this House to the fact that we are raising the change, we are changing business rates and bringing in those changes to help local businesses. But we are determined to help local businesses, and that's why we're also working to implement reforms to make the system fairer and more effective. That would include 3-year evaluations, removing the so-called staircase tax and with the new check, challenge and appeal system, and we're aiming to increase the local share of business rate receipts to 75% from 2020-21. And in relation to future taxation, I can assure him we will of course continue to keep it under review.
We're streeting.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The brutal murder of a mother in my constituency, shot in the back with a crossbow in front of her family just 4 weeks before she was due to give birth to her baby, has shocked to the core people up and down our country. I know I will speak for every member of this House, Mr. Speaker, in expressing our deepest condolences to the family and our best wishes to the baby for a speedy recovery. Given that these weapons, like the crossbow used to kill my constituent, are readily available for sale online, can I urge the Prime Minister to look urgently and seriously at expanding the ambit of the Offensive Weapons Bill so that we can toughen the scope of the laws governing the sale, the possession and the use of these deadly weapons?
Prime Minister.
Can I say to the honourable gentleman, he has raised what is a terrible and tragic case in his constituency, and as he has said, the thoughts of the whole House will be with the victim's family and friends, and our deepest condolences go to them following this terrible attack. Crossbows are subject to strict controls, but we do keep the legislation under review, and we will consider the risk that such weapons pose to public safety and whether further measures are needed. And we will, of course, look at that in the context of the legislation we're bringing before the House.
Shelbrooke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When we're in agreement that the government has invested millions in the railways in this country, but when my constituents are still suffering from chronic overcrowding on carriages, that it's incumbent upon Network Rail to deliver projects on time so that new rolling stock can quickly be put into place to alleviate their overcrowding.
Minister.
Well, can I say to my honourable friend, he's highlighted the fact that we are delivering the biggest rail investment programme since the Victorian era. I think he said we're spending millions on our railways. Actually, we'll be spending nearly £48 billion on modernising and renewing our railways. That will deliver better journeys, it will deliver fewer disruptions. But it's right to say that it's absolutely vital that Network Rail delivers their projects on time. I'm told that Northern's new rolling stock is currently planned to serve lines from June, July next year. But I know my honourable friend has been campaigning excellently on this issue, and I'd encourage him to continue to do so.
Von Favar.
I'm privileged to have 2 award-winning sixth form colleges in my constituency. However, with no increase in funding since 2010, Winstanley College has cut German A-level from the syllabus, and St John Rigby has drastically reduced pastoral support. Does the Prime Minister believe, like the Chancellor, that these are just little extras, or will she agree it's time to raise the rate?
Prime Minister.
I'd say to the honourable lady that, of course, if you look across what we've been doing in funding for education overall, we have been putting extra money into funding in the... Everybody says not in FE. Actually, in FE, we have invested nearly £7 billion this year to make sure there's an educational training place for every 16 to 19-year-old who wants one. We're also transforming technical education through the T levels, and with £500 million a year, once they're fully rolled out, going into that. And by 2020, the funding available to support adult participation in further education is planned to be higher than at any time in England's history.
Kwasi Kwarteng.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. Will the Prime Minister join me in paying tribute to my constituent, Dennis Brock, who will be celebrating his 100th birthday next week? And uniquely, he has been ringing the bells in St Mary's Church, Sunbury, for 87 years, and we believe confidently that he's the oldest bell ringer in the world. Will she join me in paying tribute to him?
Prime Minister.
Can I?
Order, I want to hear about the bell ringing situation. The Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I say to my honourable friend that I'm very happy, first of all, to wish Dennis Brock a very happy 100th birthday, and secondly, to pay tribute to him for his 87 years of bell ringing. This is, I'm sure, as my honourable friend says, a considerable and significant record, and I think the support that he's given and the work that he's done, his commitment to St Mary's in Sunbury-on-Thames is truly inspiring.
Ruth Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over a third of children in my great city are currently living in poverty. Our local food banks have seen a 42% increase in demand since universal credit was imposed on us in June. Most referrals come from the Tory-led City Council, who are refusing to give them a penny. Is this compassionate conservatism?
No.
Say to the Honourable
Prime Minister.
As she is well aware, we're introducing universal credit. The previous system of the benefit system we inherited from the Labour Party did not work. It left over 1 million people living on benefits, trapped in benefits for more than up to a decade. What we are doing is ensuring that people have the more encouragement to get into the workplace, and when they're in the workplace, work always pays. And as I said, we have seen very good figures in the significant reduction in the number of children in workless households.
Mr. Kenneth Clark.
Mr. Speaker, at the moment we're in the middle of a swirl of rumours about the proposed deal with the European Union and a torrent of criticism from all the government's most ferocious critics. But one of the rumours is that if the Cabinet agrees the deal this afternoon, the government proposes later today to publish a white paper setting out the details. Will the Prime Minister give an assurance that if and when this deal is published, a statement will be made to this House of Commons when it is produced, because it is this Parliament which is going to have to decide now what to do next, and we don't want Parliament only to be consulted after another 24 hours of rumours and criticism. We must re-establish parliamentary sovereignty, and I wish the Prime Minister well in obtaining a majority for some course of action in future which is in the national interest.
Prime Minister.
Can I say to my right honourable and learned friend that there are in fact two stages in this, potentially two stages in this process. The Cabinet, as I said today, will be looking at the draft agreements that the negotiating teams have produced, and will consider and determine what the next step should be in the national interest, as my right honourable and learned friend requests us to do, and I can assure him that we will be looking at this in the national interest. And as I said, I will return to the House in order to explain the outcome of that. I will return to the House in order to explain the outcome of that. But can I also say to my right honourable friend that, of course, there is then the issue of when a final deal is agreed with the European Union, and ensuring, as we will, that proper analysis is available to members of this House before the meaningful vote takes place, and that briefings are available to members of this House on the details of the proposals that lay before, so that, as he says, members of this House are able to take their decision in the light of an understanding and of the details of the deal that has been agreed.
Joan Ryan.
Home Office documents, the Met Commissioner, the Police Federation and now even the Home Secretary say the government's cuts to policing have had an impact on the surge in violent crime. We cannot continue to see the levels of violence which resulted in 5 fatal stabbings in 6 days in London just 2 weeks ago. How many times does the Prime Minister need to be told about the dire consequences before she gives our frontline policing the resources they so clearly need?
Prime Minister.
Can I say to the Honourable Lady that I'm sure we are all concerned across this House of the attacks that have taken place in recent days in London, but indeed we are concerned about the issue of knife crime and the serious violence that we've seen, and indeed we heard earlier from her Honourable friend the reference to the use of a crossbow in attacking and sadly killing an individual. She talks about police funding, though. We've protected police funding overall since 2015. We're putting more money into the police. We're making more money available. We've announced that but it's also about ensuring that the police and the criminal justice system have the powers they need to deal with knife crime. And if she's concerned about knife crime, I suggest she asks her right honourable friend, the Leader of the Opposition, why he voted against increasing the powers to deal with knife crime.
Mr. Ian Duncan Smith.
Mr. Speaker, said my right honourable friend, I'm not going to be asking about Brexit. For now, but can I say to her that I was enormously proud of my government for agreeing to lower the stake on fixed odds betting terminals to £2 because they have caused endless harm, terrible damage to families, and it was the right decision. Since then, there has been a hiatus about the date in which this would start. Can I ask my right honourable friend, is it a reality that now that we have put down an amendment, that the government will accede and that we will get this process started on the 1st of April next year?
Prime Minister. Can I say to my right honourable friend, I know he has campaigned on this issue with a passion, because as he says, this question of the maximum stake for fixed betting terminals is one which does have an impact on vulnerable people, as well as their families and loved ones. And I recognise the strength of feeling on this issue. I know gambling addiction can devastate lives. So our priority is making sure that this change delivers the results we all want to see. We are listening to the concerns being raised by colleagues. And if my right honourable friend will have a little patience, I can tell him that my right honourable friend, the Culture Secretary, will set out further details later today.
Mr. Ronnie Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Institute of Fiscal Studies has indicated that by the year 2020-22, child poverty has risen from 30% to 37%. Now, any government who treats its people like that's not worth the salt. But I suppose this government never had any salt anyway. Shouldn't the government be ashamed of itself, allowing this situation to develop with children?
Can I say to the honourable gentleman, what we have seen under this government is absolute poverty reducing to a record low. We have also seen, as I've referenced earlier, a significant reduction in the number of children in workless households. When you look at the figures, actually 3/4 of children are taken out of poverty when their household moves from being a workless household to a household with work, which is why the changes we are making to ensure that our benefit system, our welfare system, is one that encourages people into work and makes sure work pays, are the right changes.
Julia Lopez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Former New Zealand High Commissioner and experienced trade negotiator Sir Lockwood Smith told our International Trade Committee, if you remain bound to the EU's regulatory system, you will not be able to have a significant global trade strategy. Will my right honourable friend advise if this might be one of the prices to pay for her Brexit deal?
Prime Minister.
No, it is not one of the prices paid that she refers to. We will be able to still strike those trade deals around the rest of the world, and I'm pleased to say, as I said earlier, that there are a number of countries that are not just expressing an interest in that, but as we've seen and as I saw 2-3 weeks ago, countries like Japan and Vietnam and Australia keen that we should talk to them about joining the CPTPP. We specifically looked at our ability, under the proposals we put forward, to strike those trade deals around the world, and we will have an independent trade policy. We will be able to strike those trade deals.
Liz Saville-Roberts.
Diolch yn fawr. It's no secret that Labour Welsh Government has been somewhat lacklustre in what it demands from the British Government on Brexit. So I will speak on behalf of Wales. When will the Devolve Parliaments be given the opportunity to see the withdrawal agreement text and see for themselves the devastating effect leaving the European frameworks will have on each of the devolved nations?
Prime Minister.
Lady, that, as I indicated in response to my right honourable and learned friend, the member for Rushcliffe, we will ensure that information is available to members of this House on the withdrawal agreement and on the future relationship that is agreed with the European Union. We will ensure that briefings are available, that documents are available, and that the analysis that the government has previously committed to itself to is available, so that when members of this House come to the meaningful vote on a deal, they will be able to have that information and cast their vote against the background of that information.
Sir Roger Gale.
Mr. Speaker, further to the point raised by my right honourable friend, the member for Rushcliffe,
as soon as practicable following the Cabinet meeting this afternoon, would my right honourable endeavour to make available to all members the details of the draft agreement, so that those of us who wish to do so can comment upon the basis of fact rather than ill-informed speculation.
Prime Minister.
Can I say to my honourable friend that obviously the Cabinet is meeting to determine what the next steps are in relation to this issue. That if this is a deal that is then taken forward for further debate and negotiation with the European Union, I believe it is the intention to ensure that the details of that deal are made public so people can look at the facts.
Dr. Rosanna Allen Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If what is being reported is correct, the Prime Minister is set on ploughing through with a Brexit deal that will be bad for our economy, bad for our jobs and bad for hard-working people up and down this country. If the Prime Minister honestly believes that she commands the will of the people, will she put her Brexit deal to the people, either through a general election or, failing that, a new referendum?
Prime Minister.
Can I say to the honourable lady, first of all, we're negotiating a deal that will be good for the economy of the United Kingdom. It will be a deal that will ensure we continue to have a good trading relationship with the European Union, but also that we're able to strike independent trade deals around the rest of the world. And on the issue of the second referendum, there was a referendum in this country in 2016. We asked the British people whether they wanted to remain in the EU or leave the European Union. They voted to leave, and that's what this government will deliver.
Mr. Simon Hoare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning, an incredibly well-attended AGM of the thalidomide APPG took place. Could I invite my honourable friend, my right honourable friend, to lend her support and that indeed of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office to talk to the German government, to persuade them of the case of the merit for social justice, and to deliver a lasting solution for those who have suffered for too long?
Well, can I say to my honourable friend, and I first of all thank him for the way he has been championing this cause, and I think it is significant that so many years after this thalidomide caused the problems and the difficulties for people that it did, we still see, as he says, having people like himself and others having to campaign on this particular cause. And I will certainly look into and ask the Foreign and Commonwealth Office to look into what he says about the possibility of speaking to the German government on this particular issue.
Mike Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Asia Bibi spent 8 years on death row in Pakistan for a crime she did not commit. Since the High Court quashed her conviction, she has been in hiding. Weekend reports suggested she had applied for asylum in Britain. Does the Prime Minister agree that Britain should be a beacon for human rights and those fleeing religious persecution?
Prime Minister. I say to the honourable gentleman that our primary concern is for the safety and security of Asia Bibi and her family, and we want to see a swift resolution of the situation. Obviously, there's an issue for the government and courts in Pakistan, and the Prime Minister, Imran Khan, has publicly supported the Supreme Court and promised to uphold the rule of law while providing continued protection for Asia Bibi. But a number of countries are in discussion about providing a safe destination for her once the legal process is complete. I'm sure the House will understand. Given the sensitivity of this case, it wouldn't be right to comment on the details of those proposals at this stage. But we remain in close contact with international partners to ensure Asia Bibi's long-term safety and her interests.
In Vickers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister confirmed earlier that we will indeed be leaving the common fisheries policy, which is very welcome, but she'll be aware there is still considerable concern within the industry. Can she give an absolute assurance that it will be for the UK and the UK alone to determine who fishes in our national waters after a deal is signed?
Prime Minister.
I reassure my honourable friend that we will become an independent coastal state, and it will be the UK negotiating on the UK's behalf in terms of access to UK waters.
Kate Hoey.
Speaker, the Prime Minister will know that back in 1965 there was a neighbourhood agreement between Northern Ireland and the Republic that each could fish in each other's 6-mile water. 2 years ago, the Irish Republic reneged on that. We, of course, playing the moral high ground, didn't renege. So now all the Irish fishermen can come into the Northern Ireland waters, but Northern Ireland fishermen can't go to the Republic. Would she try and speak up sometimes for Northern Ireland fishermen and not feel that she always has to be supporting the Irish government?
Can I say
Prime Minister.
Right Honourable Lady, that consistently throughout these negotiations, one of the issues I have had at the forefront of my thinking has been the people of Northern Ireland. She raises a specific issue about fishing, and I'm happy to look at the specific issue of the 6-mile waters that she has referred to. We will become an independent coastal state, as I've just said in response to my honourable friend, and we will ensure that it is the United Kingdom that is negotiating on behalf of the UK for access to UK fishing waters. But the people of Northern Ireland are at the forefront of our concerns in relation to the deal that we're negotiating.
The Prime Minister is to be commended for initiating her race disparity audit, which showed, amongst other facts, that traveller children have the worst educational, health and employment outcomes of almost any group.
They do.
Given the acute distress also caused to many settled residents by this policy, and given the support for my 10-minute rule bill yesterday calling for a review of this area across the House, would the Prime Minister please appoint a senior Cabinet Minister to undertake a complete review of this area so we can have better outcomes for all of our constituents?
Well, my honourable friend raises an issue which I know is of concern for many across the UK in terms of what they see in their own constituencies. And as he said, there is also a concern about the impact on the educational attainment of traveller children. As he will know, we published a consultation on tackling unauthorised encampments in April, and we will respond on that in due course. But we are committed to strengthening the authorities, local councils and the police's powers to address these problems and to ensure fair play. And we take this issue very seriously, and we're carefully considering the response that we can give to the consultation.
On break.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Prime Minister confirm that her deal will leave the United Kingdom a rule taker, not a rule maker? In other words, a vassal state? And isn't the best way to get herself out of this mess that she and her colleagues have caused by allowing the people a vote in a people's vote?
Prime Minister.
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman, and I think I've given him the same answer to this question on a number of occasions, the people, this Parliament gave the British people the vote on whether or not to stay in the European Union in 2016. The British people voted, they voted to leave, and it is this government that will deliver on that vote and deliver Brexit.
Order. Oh, very briefly, yes. Point of order, Liz Kendall.
Following the question by the right honourable member from Rushcliffe, can you advise members, Mr. Speaker, whether you have had any indication about when a statement will be made on the apparent withdrawal agreement that has been agreed with the EU? We hear rumours that a statement may be made tomorrow. Many honourable members may already have commitments for tomorrow. I understand that this House needs to mark the 70th birthday of the Prince of Wales today. But in the remaining 6 hours, surely we could discuss the most important issue facing this country in a generation.
Yeah. Well, I'm very grateful to the honourable lady for her point of order. The candid answer to her is that I had been given to understand that there would be a statement on this matter in all likelihood tomorrow. Factually, to respond to the honourable lady, what I would say to her is that the Chair would be perfectly amenable to a statement before then. That is not, however, a judgment for me. It is properly a judgment for the government. I understand what she says about people having commitments tomorrow, but it does seem to me a reasonable order. It does seem to me a reasonable point to make in response, that if members consider this to be a supremely important matter, they can potentially rearrange their diaries in order to be present. I'm always in favour, as she knows, of statements sooner rather than later, but I don't think we should, if I may say so, have a great row about whether a statement is today or tomorrow. What I would like to say to members is that when there is a statement to this House, in conformity with the practice that I have applied for nearly 9.5 years from this chair, there will be a full opportunity for members in all parts of the House, and potentially expressing or representing all sorts of different points of view, to be heard. That's the way it's always been, and as far as I'm concerned, that is the way it will continue to be. Well, a point of order from the Father of the House, of course. Point of order, Mr. Kenneth Clarke.
Well, it's the same subject, Mr. Speaker, but although you say you have no role in this, do you not agree that it's always been, until very recently, the Constitutional Convention in this House, that when a government announces a major policy, it does so, first of all, by a statement here in the House of Commons, usually simultaneously with the publication of the White Paper. And with great respect, it's not just a question of members having other commitments or the convenience. We are slipping into a practice where the government, firstly, policies are leaked in advance, then the government actually briefs the press and the great national debate breaks out, and then Parliament finally gets the opportunity to discuss it the day later. So if you do have any opportunity to discuss with the usual channels what the proper role of Parliament should be, I think your assistance would be greatly appreciated.
Well, I'm very grateful to the Right Honourable and learned gentleman for that point of order. I am bound to say to him that my attitude had been that we have in this country cabinet government, and the policy is the policy of the government only when it has been approved by the cabinet. Members can take their own view on whether I'm right or wrong, but I'm simply seeking to explain to the Right Honourable and learned gentleman that the premise on which I'm working is that it will be government policy if and only if, and if and only if and only when it's been approved by the Cabinet. It therefore did not seem to me to be unreasonable if the Cabinet was meeting this afternoon for the House to hear a statement tomorrow. However, if it is possible for that statement to be made today, in the sense that a policy has been agreed, I am at the service of the House, and I am in favour of the statement being made at the earliest possible opportunity. That point will have been heard on the Treasury bench, and I'm grateful to the Father of the House for his assistance in this important matter. Point of order, Kirsty Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wonder if you could advise me about which courses of action are available to raise the issue. The Chief Minister of Gibraltar has, I understand, been briefed by the Minister of State for Europe. I understand that no such courtesy has been afforded to the Scottish Government. Mr. Speaker, how do I bring a minister here to ask why the Scottish Government has not yet seen the final deal, but Gibraltar has?
There may be an opportunity for an exchange later in the day. The Minister for the Cabinet Office is perched, as though he's about to leap to his feet with alacrity to respond through me to the Honourable Lady. Minister Lidington.
If it will help the Honourable Lady, I had a very constructive meeting with the First Ministers of both Wales and Scotland last Friday morning, where we discussed the progress of negotiations as they were at that point. My right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, will, when the Cabinet has taken a view and come to a decision about what has been agreed provisionally between negotiators, talk directly to the First Ministers of Scotland and Wales, because it is quite right that they should be fully briefed on what it is that the Cabinet has decided.
Thank you. Oh, very well. I hope it's not vexatious. I hope it's not a point of frustration, Mr. Doherty-Hughes. Point of order, Mr. Martin Doherty-Hughes.
I wouldn't be frustrated at all, Mr. Speaker. Especially not in here. 1 year has now passed since my constituent Jagtar Singh Johal has been arrested in India with neither evidence nor a witness placed before a court of law, and report of torture placed before the United Nations Rapporteur on Torture. I have raised the issue to you previously, Mr. Speaker, seeking ministerial responses to both letters to requesting meetings with the Foreign Secretary. A commitment was given the last time I raised this on the very floor of the House. Can you assure me, Mr Speaker, that the new Foreign Secretary, while I'm standing here and my constituents' brothers in the undergallery, that commitment could be made either through a statement to the House or by me writing to the Minister directly yet again, as I have done already?
Well, I'm sorry that it is necessary for the honourable gentleman repeatedly to write to ministers on this matter, and it's obvious that he's dissatisfied with the response or lack thereof. My only advice to the honourable gentleman is the advice I usually give to members irritated in these circumstances, which is persist. Persist, man. Persist. And the honourable gentleman is a dexterous and adroit parliamentary performer, and he will know the instruments that are available to him. And if he believes, as I rather imagine he does, that the matter is urgent, he may wish to deploy a procedure that might give him a chance of raising the matter with a minister in the chamber on that basis. Point of order, Mr. Jonathan Ashworth.
Grateful. The House may well not have seen that another issue has just broken in the news, namely that over 48,000 women have not received correspondence regarding cervical screening appointments and have gone without correspondence regarding cervical screening results, 500 of which apparently concerned abnormal results. This is the latest failing of Capita, and Capita should lose this contract and the service should become in-house. The previous Health Secretary, the current Foreign Secretary, would routinely update the House on these types of matters. Has the Secretary of Health given you indication that he's going to come to this House and update the House so we can ask questions on behalf of our constituents?
The answer to the Shadow Secretary of State for Health is no, but I would very much expect that the House will be addressed on this matter very soon, certainly within a matter of days. And the honourable gentleman, in common with the honourable gentleman member for the Scottish National Party to whom I replied a moment ago, is well versed in the instruments available to him, and if he doesn't get a statement or in lieu of a statement and as a reserve mechanism, he knows that he can seek to raise the matter on an urgent basis, and the Chair, on I think 528 occasions over the last 9.5 years, has judged that a matter is urgent, whether the government thinks it is or not. Point of order, Mr. Nigel Dodds.
On a point of order, Mr. Speaker, given the very clear decision of the House yesterday in relation to the publication of legal advice and the reported very worrying comments of the Attorney-General in recent hours, can you ensure, Mr. Speaker, that the advice will be brought forward in a very timely way and should certainly not be very long delayed after the publication of any white paper or any statement, that these things should happen virtually simultaneously if we're to have a proper and informed debate on the statement or whatever comes forward? The House spoke clearly yesterday, and that must be acceded to by the government.
Short answer is that I agree entirely with the right honourable gentleman, and I couldn't put it better myself. I hope that that message has been heard clearly on the Treasury bench. What happened yesterday was not an expression of opinion by the House of Commons. It was an expression of the will of this House. That will must be respected by the executive branch. It's as simple and incontestable as that. If there are no further points of order, perhaps we can now proceed, colleagues, and I have received a letter from the Clerk of the House, and as is customary in such circumstances, I propose to read it to the House. The letter is as follows. Dear Mr. Speaker, I write to inform you that I have indicated to Her Majesty the Queen that I intend to surrender my patent as Clerk of the House on the 1st of March next year. I shall then have served the House for over 43 years. For the last 16 years at the table. In March 2019, it will be 4 years since I was appointed as the 50th Clerk of the House. You have long known of my plans to retire in the first quarter of 2019, and I am grateful to you and the House of Commons Commission for agreeing in July of this year to all the detailed arrangements for selecting my successor, which can now be activated. It has been a turbulent 4 years, covering 3 governments, 2 general elections and 2 referendums. The murders of Joe Cox MP and PC Palmer, threats to our physical and cyber security, and the ebb and flow of launching restoration and renewal. It has seen the establishment of the new Parliamentary Digital Service and the Parliamentary Security Department, as well as new governance structures. And it hardly needs saying there may be more turbulence over the next few weeks and months. The last 12 months have also, of course, seen the surfacing in various ways of the complex issue of bullying and harassment and sexual misconduct in the parliamentary community. I am confident that we can deal with it if we all acknowledge past failings, as I readily do, and move beyond concerns about process to reach a place where, quite simply, everybody in the community treats everybody else with respect and dignity, and where, if they do not, they are called out and, if necessary, sanctioned. It has been a privilege, if not always a positive pleasure, to do this job, and the other 14 jobs I have done here, in all of them sustained by the loyalty and friendship of my colleagues across the House of Commons service and in the House of Lords. I could not have been prouder than when I was appointed as the head of the House of Commons service 4 years ago. The House of Commons service are a remarkably talented, diverse and dedicated group of public servants, and I will miss them. I will also miss the support and friendship of members on all sides of the House. I do not think the public appreciate the work of members or their staff as they should, and perhaps they never will. Members demonstrate the best of public service in so many ways, in scrutiny and debate and inquiry here, and in representing their constituents. I have found the House at its best to be a kind and generous place. I am also glad over the past 4 years to have been able to visit a number of constituency offices around the country and see at first hand the public service provided by members' staff. Members and their staff carry out their work in the face of spiteful abuse and threat and vilification. They deserve better. Finally, I would like to thank you, all the deputy speakers with whom I have worked, and the chairs and members of the select committees I have served for their friendship, collegiality and good humour, especially in times of tension or difficulty. The 10 years since the expenses scandal and the Wright report have seen the House of Commons come back from a very low place to being as open and vibrant and independent and outward-looking as at any time in modern history. I am proud to have played a small part in that journey. Whatever happens over the next few months, the House of Commons will be at the centre of it, and that is how it should be. I am confident that the House will continue to thrive as the central institution of our parliamentary democracy, cherishing the old while embracing the new, and holding fast to the recognition that parliamentary service is, in the truest sense, a form of public service. Yours ever, David. An exceptional occasion justifies an exceptional response. David, I'm extraordinarily grateful to you. You've been an outstanding clerk of the House. You have given dedicated and brilliant public service. I am grateful to you, and everybody, I believe, in this place is grateful to you. Members with experience in this place will know that there is an occasion for tributes to the outgoing clerk. That occasion is not today, but it will come subsequently, and I feel sure that it will involve a very substantial number of members wishing to participate and to record both their respect and their appreciation of an exceptional public servant. Thank you, colleagues. Presentation of Bill. Brendan O'Hara.
European Union withdrawal, evaluation of effects on health and social care sectors.
Second reading what day?
Friday, 25th of January 2019, Mr. Speaker.
Friday, the 25th of January 2019. Thank you. Order. 10-minute rule motion. Mrs. Helen Goodman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to bring in the Freehold Properties Management Charges and Shared Facilities Bill. A couple of years ago, I had a trickle of complaints about the poor upkeep and unfair fees being charged to homeowners on new estates. This has now turned into a torrent and latterly a flood. Constituents of mine living at Hazelbank, Burton Wood, Durham Gate, Midridge Vale, and now Castle Vale and Starkforth Park have all been affected. I am grateful to them for alerting me to what I now discover is a national problem. I also wish to thank Cathy Priestley, who's sitting in the gallery at the moment, who has set up the national pressure group Homeowners' Rights Network, fondly known as Hornet. She has been campaigning on behalf of homeowners and really understands the problems. The first issue is that the public spaces are not made up to a proper standard. After 8 years, one man I met is still living in an unmade road. Promises of green areas, woodland, play facilities, and even street lighting are broken. As it happens, County Durham has miles of unadopted roads of terraced housing built by mine owners in the late 19th century. Now we have property developers with the same exploitative disregard for homeowners. We are building the 21st century blight. Secondly, the fees are high, rising, uncapped and unregulated. One constituent told me their fee had risen from £60 to £134 in 4 years. At this rate, in 16 years' time, it will be £3,316 a year. Another faced a 50% rise in 1 year. On the Midridge Vale estate, the total payments were £27,000, and this was just for grass cutting. There is a total lack of transparency about the way the fees are made up. Management charges usually exceed upkeep costs, with items such as company admin fees, accountancy, dormant account, transfers appearing to be plucked from the air. On one small estate, the actual maintenance costs were less than a fifth of the fees charged. On another, the homeowners found a gardener who would do the work for £400. The agent then promptly added a £400 admin fee. Extra sums are charged for installing television aerials, and residents have been tied to E.ON as their electricity provider. All of this looks like just another way for property developers to screw more money out of hard-pressed households. It really is a private new bill tax. So the news that Persimmon boss Jeff Fairburn received a £75 million bonus was greeted with outrage.
Quite right too.
The third problem is that when challenged over the fees or upkeep by residents, the management companies adopt an ultra-aggressive stance. My constituents have been bullied with threats of High Court action or even the bailiffs. This is going on across the country. We estimate that 1.3 million households are currently affected. So the response which Hornet have had from the government that people should take this up with developers, or that they will legislate at some point in the future to give a right of challenge through the first-tier tribunal, is wholly inadequate. Individual citizens cannot challenge multi-billion-pound corporations. This is because the underlying problem is the legal structure, and my bill seeks to change this. The large property developers like Persimmon, Barrett and Taylor Wimpey are scamming people from the start. Purchasers are offered solicitors who are not truly independent and appear to be contracted by the developers, which is surely something the Law Society ought to address. Many people feel they were missold, and this is increasingly looking like another PPI scandal. People are also worried that the situation will make it very difficult for them to sell their houses in the future, and so they have an asset of uncertain value. The open spaces are initially owned by the property developers who sell them, and the right to manage them onto agents. The same names crop up over and over again: Greenbelt and Gateway. Indeed, one Anthony John Dean is the director of 130 such companies. This monopolistic position then gives the managing agents the opportunity to mismanage and overcharge with impunity. Some of my constituents have discovered the land has been put into trusts or covenanted to avoid liability and control its use. The residents are powerless to appoint new agents or influence their behaviour. Unlike leaseholders, who have access to a dedicated ombudsman service, freeholders have no legal recourse in the event of a dispute. Using old law, in particular section 121 of the 1925 Property Act, the agents can place charges on the property if residents are late with payments. It's an incredibly one-sided contract. Homeowners don't have the power to ask for justification of costs, but the management company can legally send in bailiffs or threaten repossession of the home if a resident doesn't pay on time. This is why people are coining the terms leasehold and fake freehold. Indeed, there is no point in the government legislating to give leaseholders the right to buy their freeholds unless they strengthen the legal position of freeholders. My bill seeks to tackle this problem. To prevent more people from being caught in this trap in the future, developers should be required to make up the public spaces to adoptable standard on a reasonable timescale. But obviously, for existing homeowners, a different approach is needed. This bill will cap and regulate estate maintenance fees to give people the security of knowing prices cannot increase indefinitely. Secondly, the bill will introduce measures to ensure shared facilities are maintained to an adequate standard to end the money-for-nothing culture of property companies. Finally, it will make provision for the transfer to genuine self-management to end the stranglehold of managing agents. The overwhelmingly positive response I have had from colleagues across the chamber demonstrates that this is a national problem. Currently, we estimate 1.3 million householders are affected. Given the government's ambitions for house building, many more soon will be. We need to grip this problem and act fast.
The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Faisal Rashid, Justin Madders, Louise Haig, Ian Austin, Sir Peter Bottomley, Ian Mearns, Mr William Ragg, Fiona Bruce, Catherine McKinnell, Jim Fitzpatrick, Mary Glinden and myself, sir.
Thank you. Helen Goodman.
Freehold Properties, Management Charges and Shared Facilities Bill.
Second reading what day?
25th of January 2019.
25th of January 2019. Thank you. I had been given to understand that there would be some points of order now, but I don't see any. If anybody wants to raise a point of order, he or she can do so, but I had just been told less than 5 minutes ago that there would be, but there aren't. That's absolutely fine. Simply responding to what I've been told. We now come to the motion for an address on the 70th birthday of His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales. To move the motion, I call the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, over the past 70 years, His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales has played many roles in our national life. As a sailor, he commanded a minesweeper in the Royal Navy. As an airman, he gained his wings with the RAF. And as the founder of the Prince's Trust, he has worked tirelessly to help more than 900,000 vulnerable young people turn their lives around. As a farmer and entrepreneur, he created and built a successful business, one that turns over more than £200 million a year and whose profits help support charitable causes. And as heir to the throne, he has unstintingly supported Her Majesty the Queen for many decades, working with and representing our monarch and our country, both at home and abroad. Binding those diverse strands together is a common thread, one that is encapsulated in the motto that for hundreds of years has adorned the Prince of Wales' feathers: Ich dien, I serve. Throughout the Prince of Wales' life, his commitment to public service has been total. That is true of his royal duties, which see him performing well over 600 official engagements every year. It is true of his work with the Commonwealth, in which he has played an active role for many years. And the esteem in which he is held by the Commonwealth was made clear at the Heads of Government meeting earlier this year, when the member states unanimously chose to name him as the next head of the organisation, another role in which I am sure he will excel. And it is also true of his wider work, first and foremost with the Prince's Trust and his other charities, of course, but also in his involvement with groups as diverse as the British Red Cross and Turquoise Mountain Foundation, which has helped to regenerate the historic centre of Kabul, just two of the more than 400 organisations that he serves as patron. Yet this public work only begins to scratch the surface of the Prince of Wales' life. He is also an author, an artist, a sportsman. As a student, when he became the first heir apparent to graduate from university, he also displayed an aptitude for comic acting. I'm told his impression of Peter Sellers' Blue Bottle from his beloved Goon Show is particularly on point. He is, I believe, the only public figure to have appeared on both Gardener's Question Time and Australian MasterChef, not to mention once delivering the weather forecast on BBC Scotland. And he has a great and wide-ranging love of music. Indeed, he remarked in 1974 that, "If I hear rhythmic music, I just want to get up and dance," something I'm sure many of us empathise with, Mr. Speaker. The more one looks at the Prince's life, the more one sees a man who has spent 70 years defying expectations and refusing to be categorised. It is an approach that has seen him delivering a speech in pidgin to an audience in Nigeria only last week during an official Commonwealth tour, encouraging his sons to spend childhood holidays collecting litter from the local countryside, and choosing to celebrate his 40th birthday with 1,500 young people from deprived backgrounds. And it is an approach that often shows him to be a man ahead of his time. In one of his first major public speeches in 1970, the Prince of Wales warned of the horrifying effect of pollution in all its forms, with particular criticism reserved for the mountains of refuse created by plastic bottles that are used once and discarded. Half a century later, the UK and the world have woken up to the plastic threat and are taking action to tackle it. In his debating debut at the Cambridge Union, the young Prince spoke about the potentially dehumanising effects of technology in the workplace, another issue that is now at the front of many minds as we consider the impact of artificial intelligence. The same foresight can be seen in his long-held views on urban regeneration, on sustainable agriculture, on interfaith dialogue, and on improving the quality of the built environment. Each of them issues that, after being raised by the Prince, have moved to the mainstream, becoming widely embraced and accepted. But, Mr. Speaker, we could not pay tribute to His Royal Highness without mentioning perhaps his most important role of all, that of father and, more recently, of grandfather. Regardless of your background or resources, raising children is never an easy task. It is made all the more difficult when they suffer a devastating loss at an early age. So today, as Prince William and Prince Harry make their own way in the world and begin to raise their own families, I know I speak for all of us when I say they are a true credit to their father. We as a nation are immensely proud of them, and I'm sure he is too. On behalf of the whole House, it gives me great pleasure to wish His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales a very happy 70th birthday, and to offer him our very best wishes for the years ahead as he continues his remarkable record of service to his Queen, his country, and his Commonwealth.
The question is as on the order paper. I call the Leader of the Opposition, Mr Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It's a pleasure to support this motion. Many people across the country will be wishing His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, a very happy 70th birthday. It might come as a surprise to many that His Royal Highness and I have something in common. We are both, it seems, leaving it late when it comes to career progression, although he has had a lifetime preparing for this role. People in this country may have varying opinions about the institution of monarchy, but no one would say that being heir to the throne of the UK, as well as 15 other nations, is an easy job. His Royal Highness has shown a commitment to public service and charity and a passion for several notable causes throughout his life. They say the past is a different place. And Britain, the Britain of 1948, the year the Prince was born, was a very different place than the Britain of today. In many ways, it was a time of great optimism. It was the year of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, aiming to give universal rights to everyone across the globe, no matter who they are. And it was, of course, also the year of the founding of the National Health Service, which has celebrated its 70th birthday this year. But it was also a time of hardship. The country emerging from the horrors and destruction of World War II. We'd beaten fascism, but there was little rest. The work had to be done to rebuild Europe in the aftermath of that war. In those days, our country was considerably poorer, both economically and culturally, not having benefited from the richness of multiculturalism we enjoy today. And it was, of course, the year that the Empire Windrush docked in Tilbury, bringing people from Jamaica and the Caribbean to start new lives here in Britain. Many of them and their children and grandchildren now form the integral part of our society, our country, and indeed of this House. In 1948, British towns and cities were still scarred with bomb craters, rationing for food and clothing remained in place, and censorship was enforced on stage and in our theatres. Prince Charles might have regretted the ending of censorship when, at a televised awards ceremony in 1994, the late, great Spike Milligan, who was a good friend of the Prince, infamously described him in words which I'm sure even today, Mr Speaker, you would not permit me to use in the House. Spike later faxed the Prince to apologise, asking, "I suppose a knighthood is now out of the question." Obviously, the Prince accepted the apology because Spike did indeed later get an honorary knighthood. Throughout his life, the Prince of Wales has committed himself to public service, as the Prime Minister said. The Prince's Charities, supported by the Prince's Charities Foundation, is comprised of 19 different charities. The charities focus on issues from the arts to the natural world. They include initiatives such as the British Asian Trust, which celebrates our country's openness to the world and aims to help lift people out of poverty both in South Asia and in Britain. The Trust picks up on another of the Prince's own passions, which I've regularly talked to him about, giving support to young people from all backgrounds and every part of our country. The Trust has done unrivalled work in opening up opportunities for young people, helping them to find employment, education and training, unlocking the talents so they're able to lead the lives they want to, and they deserve to be able to lead. An example of this is the work the Trust does is Dumfries House in Ayrshire, which supports courses for young people teaching practical crafts such as stonemasonry and carpentry. The work done there reminds me of a quote by the Victorian socialist and promoter of such skilled crafts, William Morris, whose work I believe the Prince would appreciate. Morris wrote, "I do not want art for a few, any more than education for a few, or freedom for a few. Instead of writing people off, as some are often too willing to do, the Prince's Trust, its supporters and its hard-working staff have endeavoured to make a real difference to young people's lives and provide the support and encouragement that, for whatever reason, had previously been absent from their lives. The Prince has also shown a consistent commitment to our often ignored and natural world. As our climate and soils are being destroyed before our very eyes, the Prince's interest in the natural environment has not gone unnoticed. My friend, the late great MP Michael Meacher, once recalled how, as an Environment Minister, he and the Royal Highness would consort to persuade the government to do more on green energy. Asked by the press if there was a constitutional problem with a member of the royal family advocating a political opinion, Michael, a committed Republican, replied, "Maybe he was pushing it a bit, but I was delighted, of course." Well, Mr. Speaker, it is vital that the principle that the royal family remains above politics is there. But Prince Charles, as an ambassador for a country that does take seriously the scientific realities of climate destruction, I do wonder if there's anyone on the planet who might be able to get that message through to the President of the United States. It could well be Prince Charles to do that. Indeed, His Royal Highness may be a Knight of the Garter and a Knight Grand Cross of the Order of the Bath, but few accolades can compare to when, in 2012, a brand new species native to Ecuador was discovered and was given the name the Prince Charles Steam Tree Frog. His Royal Highness's horticultural exploits are well known. I'm a keen gardener and allotment holder, and I can sympathise with the Prince's desire to talk to plants. I've certainly found them better listeners than many members of this House over the years. Mr. Speaker, it's traditional to give gifts, especially when one reaches a milestone like a 70th birthday. So I was thinking of giving His Royal Highness a jar of Corbyn Original jam from my allotment. But I'm now suffering from a deep crisis of confidence. Will my jam match up to the standard of Prince's Duchy Original Jam? I don't know how to deal with this conundrum. If His Royal Highness is listening, perhaps he could offer some advice and let me know. Mr. Speaker, as the Prince of Wales reaches 70, can I, on behalf of these benches, wish him and all his family a very happy birthday.
Thank you. Sir Henry Bellingham.
Mr. Speaker, it was a pleasure to follow those two incredibly generous speeches. I absolutely endorse and support everything that has been said so far about His Royal Highness and about the Prince's Trust and the other foundations. I've had the privilege, Mr. Speaker, and the honour of working closely with His Royal Highness in my capacity as the MP for North West Norfolk, which includes the Sandringham estate. I also had the privilege when I was in the Foreign Office to accompany him on 2 foreign visits. So I had the chance to see for myself his extraordinary personality. Sandringham, Mr. Speaker, is a large and highly diversified estate that employs a significant number of people in my constituency.